Good morning, everyone. My name is Arona Bender. I am a NOAA LMR CSC graduate fellow at Hampton University in the Marine and Environmental Science Department, working under the advisement of Dr. Caroline McCain. And today I'll be presenting to you my research looking at the genetic approaches to monitoring the effects of climate change on leopard seals, Hydrurga leptonyx, in the Antarctic Peninsula. To begin, global climate change is impacting not only the environment of the continent of Antarctica, it is also impacting the living marine resources there. For example, we've been noticing that there has been a 10% decrease per decade of winter ice. And there's also a decrease in krill availability to predators as they seem to be shifting more southwards. However, strikingly enough, what we noticed at the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula in this area that is zoomed in right here, which is Cape Shiraf Livingston Island, what we're noticing in that region is that leopard seal sightings are occurring more frequently there. And this is a closer image of what Cape Shiraf Livingston Island looks like, in which we have the NOAA Antarctic Marine Living Resources Program research site right there, that green building. And they're the ones that fulfill the task for the Commission for Conservation of Antarctic Marine Resources. And every year during the austral summers, they would go to Cape Shiraf in order to collect scientific data on targeted species, as well as their dependent and associated predators. And my species of interest is leopard seals, and the reason, and they belong to the Lobodotini tribe, and they're one of the 4 Antarctic seals. And they are a top Antarctic apex predator. They are very solitary animals, and they do have a circumpolar distribution around the continent of Antarctica. Now, in the past, there has been several studies that looked at estimating their population abundance. For example, in 1953, Laws estimated a total of 40,000 individuals, whereas Sheffer in 1958 estimated between 100,000 to 300,000 individuals. The most recent estimate that we have currently is from Southwell et al. In 2012, in which they used a shipboard and aerial sighting technique, and the total estimate they got was 35,500. Now, their estimate comes with very high uncertainty because it could mean that there's either 10,900 individual leopard seals, or they could be on the higher scale of over 100,000 individual leopard seals. Other techniques that have been used are underwater acoustic surveys, and that was conducted by Rogers et al. In 2013, where she looked at the local density estimate. However, currently to date, there has not been any molecular genetic technique that has been used in order to study the effective population size. And the reason why we are interested in studying leopard seal is because they do exert top-down forces on other species. And a recent study conducted by Krause et al. In 2021 showed that leopard seal predation on Antarctic fur seals is partially contributing to their collapse in the Antarctic Peninsula. And the figure on my right, your left, shows the pup count throughout the years. And what we're noticing is that in these 3 locations that they studied, there seems to be a decrease in trend in the pup counts. And the image on the right shows the leopard seal predation rate throughout the seasons, and we're generally seeing an increase in trend. And there might be other factors that do contribute to the Antarctic fur seal pup declining. But we also can see that there is a correlation happening between leopard seal predation rate and the pup count declining as well. Now, because they are being sighted more frequently at Cape Giraffe and the fact that the ship and aerial survey techniques typically have high uncertainty when estimating their abundance, we propose using genetic molecular techniques in order to study their effective population size as well as their historical demography. And we predict that leopard seal population size is at least 1 order of magnitude higher than recent estimates. And also leopard seal population expanded during the late Pleistocene era. My 3 main objectives were to estimate species level genetic diversity. Secondly, is to infer the size of leopard seal breeding population. And thirdly, it is to understand leopard seal's historical demography. First, we begin with the field methods, and it would have been a wonderful opportunity to go to Cape Giraffe to collect the data. However, we do have a wonderful collaboration with the NOAA Antarctic Ecosystem Research Division team, and they're the ones that would collect the sample for us, and they've been collecting samples for over several decades now. And when they are about to tag the seals to be able to identify them, that is how they're able to retrieve the skin samples, because a piece of like their skin falls off. And they store that in ethanol until they return them back to La Jolla, California, where they're housed. And my advisor, Dr. Lamine, she is also an authorized recipient of collecting pinniped skin samples. So she was able to go to La Jolla and collect about 119 skin samples, and now they're currently housed in our genetics lab at Hampton University. And so we move on to the genetic data collection, where we perform polymerase chain reaction amplification for our region of interest, after which we send the samples out to be sequenced. The third step is the analytical methods, and that is where I spent the majority of my time working on using various genetic software programs in order to look at the sequencing and statistical analysis of these samples. My first objective was to estimate species level genetic diversity of leopard seal. Our final sample size from 119, after we eliminated the sequences that were not of good quality, was a total of 90. And then we looked at several genetic parameters. The first parameter we looked at is the number of haplotypes, which is a unique sequence of bases over a region of a genome. And we found 34 unique haplotypes. The haplotype diversity was 0.96, almost approaching 1. And I was also able to reconstruct a haplotype network, which is the figure on the right. And each of the circle represents a unique haplotype. And the larger the circle indicates that more individuals in the population share that unique haplotype, but the smaller the circle indicates that less individuals in that population share that unique haplotype. And so this was just a visual representation showing the relatedness of the haplotypes that we found. And the second parameter that we looked at was the nucleotide diversity. And this is the nucleotide differences between a pair of sequences that is sampled across all pairs of sequences in the sample. And we found that the nucleotide diversity was 0.013. And what we noticed with our parameters is that they are very similar to that of Weddell seals, and that is also their sister seals. My second objective was to infer the size of leopard seal breeding population. So obtaining the value for the demographic parameter theta, I was able to use it into the equation where we first estimated the female effective population size, which was approximately 260,000. And then assuming a 1-to-1 sex ratio, the overall effective population size was approximately 520,000. My third objective was to understand leopard seal's historical demography. And so we looked at several parameters indicated right here that looks at whether a population has remained relatively stable over time, whether the population has experienced a bottleneck, or if the population has experienced a recent or a sudden expansion. And what all of these parameters indicated was that leopard seals have experienced a sudden expansion within their population. My mismatch distribution plot on the right is very smooth and unimodal. And so that also indicated to us that it was a recent expansion. And then I was able to create a Bayesian skyline plot, which is the figure on the right, the bottom one, which shows the general trajectory of their population, of the female population throughout the years. And what we noticed is that there was a gradual increase until, and then they had like a recent expansion about 35,000 years ago, all the way into the last glacial maximum era, which was a time of intense glaciation during that period. To summarize everything that we've worked on, leopard seal population size is at least one order of magnitude higher than recent estimates that Southwell et al. Found, which they estimated about 35,500 individuals. And secondly, we were able to reveal the genetic diversity of the fourth Antarctic seal living in the pack ice region, because leopard seals, they are one of the least studied out of all of the 4 species. And what we found is that their genetic parameters is very high to moderate compared to its sister species. And our mismatch distribution, our Bayesian skyline plot analysis, as well as our haplotype network and patterns of genetic diversity, all reveal a recent expansion event during the late Pleistocene. And I would like to thank all of the entities that have worked and collaborated in making this research possible, and thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much. We have time for a couple questions.
So I know that you mentioned that the leopard seal and Weddell seals are genetically similar. Do you think that the high abundance of Weddell samples could have led to a bit of a bias? Because I know it's like double the sample size compared to leopard seals. I'm just curious, or was it's already firmly established that they are genetically similar?
Oh, no, that has nothing to do with them being genetically similar. That was already established in like literatures before that they do share similarities. So we were able to compare them.
Just a quick question. You said that you use the skin from the seal. Those skin is just they shed or something? Like where did you get the skin?
So when they're applying the tag to each individual leopard seals, they're using this tool. Well, the instrument is called the pig pliers. And so when they are about to clip it on to attach the tag, a piece of the skin actually falls off. And so that's what they're able to like collect and store it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay.
So how do you think global warming is going to impact the population and this expansion that you're seeing in the leopard seals at Cape Sheriff?
That's a good question. We're not entirely sure exactly what is happening because right now what we're noticing is that they're being cited more frequently. But what I think would potentially happen is that the more frequently cited they are being, they're going to be exerting a lot of top-down forces on other populations. So it might have like the negative cascading effect on the other populations when they're increasing. So that might be something.
You mentioned that they're the least studied, and I was just curious why that was.
Well, one reason is because they're very hard to get to. They live in these very patchy, isolated locations. So in order for you to get there, it is very expensive and time consuming. So, and because they are very solitary animals as well. So they're not like congregated like some of their other, some of the other seals. They're usually located on like patch ice. So you might just find one instead of like several. So that's the reason why.
Thanks very much. We actually have to move on. I'm sorry, I saw your hand, but I hope you can catch her. We have to get our last one, our last presentation in. So thank you one more time.